In Michigan, there is a small town called Traverse City, with a population of about 15,000. It is famous for the picturesque Lake Michigan, on the shores of which several resorts can be found. In the summer, a large number of tourists are attracted by festivals and water sports events. They come to swim, ride boats, enjoy delicious local food, and appreciate the unique landscapes around Lakes Michigan. In the winter, the area is snowy and quiet, there are few tourists, and life flows very slowly. It was in such a place that 18-year-old Kalee Bruce lived and worked. She was always a cheerful and bright person. In addition, she was very smart, attractive, and determined. By the 1990s, she was considering pursuing an education. Thanks to her academic success in high school, she managed to gain admission to Northwestern Michigan College without any problems. The educational institution was located in Traverse City. To support herself away from her parents, Kalee worked as receptionist of a local beach condominium company that rented out apartments, rooms, and houses to visitors. The condominium was situated right on the lake and was very popular during the tourist season. On the evening of Monday, February 16, 1998, Kalee worked at Beach Condominiums from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. In February, there were virtually no tourists, only a few locals, so she was almost alone in the building. The night before, while talking to her friend Kim, who also worked at the condominium, she had expressed her eagerness for the start of the season, hoping for more guests and an increase in her salary. That same day, with a little over an hour left before the end of her shift, Kalee had to do some light cleaning, put everything in the utility room, and then go home. That evening, Kim was not on shift but was passing by the Beach Condominiums at about 7:30 p.m. She had been driving her friends home after they had spent time together at a restaurant. As Kim drove past Beach Condominium, she looked toward the office through the window and noticed a light in the area of the administration desk, where Kalee was preparing to close up. Kim wanted to quickly drop off her friends and then stop by to see Kalee. However, when Kim returned about 40 minutes later, she saw that the light inside was off and Kalee was nowhere to be found. Thinking she was late and that her friend had already left. Satisfied that her friend had gone home, she turned around and left. The next morning, on Tuesday, February 17, 1998, at about 7 a.m., the first person to arrive at the Beach Condominiums office was an air conditioning technician named Zachary Medin. He immediately noticed that the door was unlocked. Although this did not cause him alarm, he calmly walked inside and called out Kalee's name. Receiving no answer, he saw that no one was at the reception desk where Kalee should have already been preparing for her workday. She was never late and usually arrived early. All the lights were off, and Zachary walked around the floor. He noticed a glimmer through the crack of a door and decided to investigate further. When he got closer, he saw suspicious red stains near the threshold. It was unclear what it was, but when he opened the door, he realized the horrendous nature of the scene. In horror, Zachary ran away and immediately called emergency services at 911. When the police arrived, Zachary could barely speak, looking emotionally traumatized and barely holding back tears as he described the situation. The scene found in the utility room was soon deemed one of the most horrifying crime scenes in local law enforcement history. In the small room, where household appliances and cleaning supplies were stored, there was blood everywhere, on the walls, even the ceiling. In the middle of the room was the mutilated body of a girl. The victim was Kalee Bruce, the 18-year-old employee. Next to her body lay all the broken pieces, with shards of plastic and metal covered in dried blood, as well as particles of scalp and hair. Kalee was found naked, with one of the power cords from an iron wound tightly around her neck, cutting into her skin and crushing her larynx. According to the medical examiner's report, the victim had 19 deep lacerations that cut down to the bone. Her skull was crushed from numerous blows, fractures of the vault and facial bones were found. Severe injuries to her neck and throat were consistent with strangulation, indicating she had been beaten for an extended period with blunt objects on her body, abdomen, chest, and pelvis, leading to numerous internal bleeding. The most horrific detail discovered was a metal pin inserted into her perineum with such force that it damaged the tissues up to the pelvic bone, penetrating several centimeters into it. According to forensic experts, Kalee remained alive for some time after sustaining this injury until she eventually bled out. Her death was undoubtedly a painful one. The entire small utility room was covered with her blood, and it was smeared over her body as if she had fought back. Despite the small size of the room, it took forensic experts 6 hours to collect dozens of pieces of evidence. They discovered numerous defensive injuries, indicating a brutal struggle, along with signs of disorder around the area. Apparently, Kalee's resistance only angered her attacker. Footprints and similar traces were found strewn on the floor, suggesting that the attacker had jumped on Kalee in an attempt to cover this terrible incident. Local reports described the scene, and the first thing that struck the arriving journalist was the amount of blood. He immediately realized they were dealing with one of the most terrible crimes in the town's history. Despite years of experience reporting from dozens of bloody crime scenes, he had never seen such cruelty before. He labeled the criminal a real monster and couldn't comprehend what could drive someone to commit such an atrocity against an innocent 18-year-old girl. Kalee Bruce died at about 8 p.m. the previous day. It is possible that when Kim was standing outside the office, her friend was already beyond help. She herself miraculously avoided a collision with the killer. Kalee's family was shocked by such a brutal murder and could not understand who could wish harm to such a sweet girl. Relatives, friends, and acquaintances told detectives that Kalee was a very nice and kind person. No one had ever heard anyone speak badly of her. It was hard to imagine that someone would have a motive to attack her. Some items were missing from the crime scene, but nothing significant, so the theory of a robbery gone wrong was not considered. Detectives suspected that the perpetrator must have known Kalee personally, given the brutal nature of the attack. Revenge, hatred, or jealousy seemed likely motives. The attacker was probably observing her and knew her daily routine, allowing him to choose the moment when Kalee would be most vulnerable. He likely knew when to strike so that no one would be nearby, and she might have trusted him. They decided to search for the criminal among Kalee's immediate acquaintances and among local residents who might have been in regular contact with her, possibly even living nearby. Unfortunately, there were no CCTV cameras on the premises of the resort or even inside the office, which left them without clues. All the blood at the crime scene was analyzed and confirmed to belong to the victim, but no fingerprints could be found. It was clear that the perpetrator had some criminal experience. He was probably wearing gloves or had carefully erased all traces of his presence. The forensic team collected more than 100 pieces of evidence from the small utility room. The only trace left by the aggressor were boot prints found on the body and the bloody floor. Forensic experts used a special substance that allowed them to obtain a clearer pattern of the shoe's sole along with all the small details. When the police received a full footprint, they assessed the killer's size. He had to be a tall, strong man who wore large shoes. The print had a clear tread, resembled work shoes. Detectives visited local stores to find a similar pair and discovered that the prints matched shoes from a brand called Pajar. When combined with the prints found on Kalee's body, they turned out to be identical, leading to a person who likely used specific clothing. The young man who worked in the condominium quickly attracted the authorities' attention, Zachary Medden, who discovered the body and reported it to the police. Detectives were alarmed that he had gone to the police to report finding the body. This was a tactic sometimes used by murderers hoping to remove suspicion from themselves and gather information about the progress of the investigation. Zachary was taken to the station for an official interrogation to verify and exclude him from the list of suspects. He was still visibly shaken by what he had seen, struggling to control himself, and appeared sincere. Zachary voluntarily allowed his car to be searched. The investigation had reached a dead end, with no valuable information emerging and all suspects cleared. The excitement in a local community was reaching its peak. It became almost impossible to buy a regular pepper spray for self-defense, as supplies were quickly depleted. The main customers were schoolgirls and female students, afraid to walk alone or go out at night. One of the detectives arrived at the college dormitory where Kalee studied, and witnesses reported several suspicious young people who had already checked in there. They needed to be checked. In the end, it turned out that they were not involved. The detectives spoke to their friend Kim, who knew Kalee better than anyone else in the city. She said that shortly before the murder, Kalee had broken up with her boyfriend, whose name was Dylan. They broke up and started dating again. As far as Kim knew, they had broken up again, but Dylan desperately tried to renew contact with Kalee. He was obsessively persistent, even manipulative. They talked to him just 2 days after the murder. Dylan worked with heating, air conditioning equipment and serviced the units. They immediately noticed that he had boots of the brand Pilar, similar in size to the footprints found at the crime scene. Dylan had several pairs of the same brand, which were immediately sent to the laboratory for examination. However, no traces of blood could be found on them. Of course, he could have had other similar boots that he got rid of after the attack, but no matter how hard the police tried, they could not find any evidence against Dylan. Additionally, he had a reliable alibi, so he was excluded from the list of suspects. The killer could now be tens or even hundreds of kilometers away from the condominium, but the degree of cruelty suggested great hatred or sadistic inclinations. They were looking for all criminals prone to attacking women who had recently been released from prison and lived in the area. However, all efforts were in vain. During the inspection of the hill, a small metal rod was found. It was a part of a car tire valve. On it, they found Kalee's blood and several hairs that did not belong to her. One of them had an entire follicle, which allowed them to create a DNA profile of the probable criminal. Hopes for this were still low as the technology at the time was not yet perfect. In any case, this version needed to be checked, and that took time. They decided to use all the meager materials available to them. They organized a press conference and appealed to the public. The key moment on which they focused was the problem of numerous false statements. People contacted the police station, and all leads were checked. One person who contacted them was a local resident who worked as a presenter at a radio station. His name was John Chandler. He immediately noted that his information could help find the criminal. On February 26, 1998, 10 days after the murder of Kalee and following the press conference, John went to change the tires on his car. Near the resort area, there was an industrial park and a tire factory that he visited. While in the waiting room, he accidentally overheard the manager talking to the rest of the staff, trying to find one of the workers. The employees were discussing that a technician had not shown up for work and had not been seen for several days. They had all seen the press conference, so they suspected something was wrong. There were rumors that the missing man had a very bad character. One colleague mentioned that a day after the murder of Kalee, he had seen this technician wearing boots of the brand Pajar, which had suspicious dark spots. A day later, he bought himself new shoes and did not wear that pair again. After hearing all of this, John immediately called the police station to request that they check this tip. He felt that this information was very important, and the detectives were convinced of its significance. They went to the tire factory. The manager immediately admitted that John's words were true. Colleagues that morning had discussed one of the employees of the organization, who turned out to be 25-year-old Kevin Holtzer, the son of the director of the company. Several employees confirmed that he always wore large-sized Pajar boots while on shift. A few days after the murder, he had a new pair. After examining the area where Kevin usually worked, detectives noticed that small metal rods from tire valves were lying around on the floor. They looked very similar to the evidence from the crime scene. Local workers confirmed that these rods often flew off when changing tires. Now the police were sure that John's statement was leading them in the right direction. Their suspicions only grew stronger when they found out that Kevin had been renting a room in Beach Condominiums where Kalee worked for 6 months. He had the opportunity to observe her, calculate her daily routine, and choose the right time when she would be alone. In fact, Kevin spoke with investigators as early as 8 a.m. on February 17th, when Kalee's body was found. He was the only one who did not ask what had happened, which seemed strange. Kevin claimed he had quickly gone to work at the plant. Due to the lengthy process of examining the crime scene and collecting evidence, the detectives did not have the necessary clues when they spoke to Kevin. It became apparent that the criminal could have been in their hands from the very first minutes of the investigation, but he managed to slip away. The new main suspect was now wearing Pajar boots of the same size. It was decided to reanalyze the collected data and follow up on everything the local residents had said. The detectives spoke to one resident of Beach Condominiums. She said that, day of the attack, she returned home from work in the evening at about 10 p.m. The door was open, although she perfectly remembered locking it. It turned out that the master key had disappeared from the reception desk. Suspicions against Kevin were confirmed by Kalee's friend Kim, who said that he often ran into the office and lingered at the reception desk while Kalee worked there. Kim believed that Kalee liked Kevin, so he tried to spend any free minute chatting, even on far-fetched topics. He constantly asked to be let into his apartment with spare keys, which only the condominium administrator had access to. He claimed that he had forgotten or lost his own key. It seemed he was just looking for a reason to get closer to Kalee. Kevin was tall, athletic, practiced martial arts. He looked like a likely killer, but they failed to find him. He simply ran away. In search of additional information, they went to the tire factory where he worked and checked the guy's biography. They managed to find out that Kevin had problems with the police 5 years before the murder. He had been accused of abuse. In the late hours, Christina was returning home from a bar when a stranger grabbed her and dragged her into an alley, then began to beat her. She sustained very serious injuries and was sure that she was saved by a miracle. Realizing that the criminal wouldn't stop, Christina pretended to be dead and offered no resistance. As soon as she stopped moving, the criminal simply lost interest and left. Apparently, the attacker enjoyed beating and killing women, which was very disturbing. The potential serial killer could be anywhere, and now no one was safe. Trying to understand the moment when Kevin escaped, they realized that he had disappeared from all radar as soon as the press conference was over, which announced the size, brand of the shoes and the tread pattern he had worn before. In order to scare off the probable killer, the police obtained an arrest warrant and went to his apartment, but nothing valuable for their investigation could be found. There were no bloody shoes or clothing, and they even checked the drains in the bathroom, but found no traces of blood. This puzzled the detectives. Around the same time, a friend named Mike contacted the police station. He was very worried and said that he might know where to look for Kalee's killer. Just before this, he and his friend, Kevin, had spent Friday night at a club. They were drinking and chatting after a new press conference had been held. Detectives got a warrant for Kevin's arrest. During the party, Mike's phone rang. On the other end was another friend who asked where Kevin was, that the main suspect in the murder who was sitting across from Mike. Kevin became noticeably nervous, but Mike managed to say that his girlfriend had called and asked him to come home. Kevin did not suspect anything and said it was time for him to go. Mike walked Kevin to the parking lot, where they said goodbye and went their separate ways. As soon as Kevin disappeared from sight, Mike immediately called the police station, providing a description of Kevin's car and clothing. Mike had said he was heading south but gave no exact directions. Kevin was driving a noticeably gold-colored car, which was quickly tracked down. Detectives arrived at the parking lot, but the car was abandoned, and Kevin was not there. It seemed he had managed to escape punishment again. The police spoke to the guard, who admitted that he had talked with Kevin for a long time before Kevin fled. He reportedly headed to Indiana and planned to use the train. The detectives were following Kevin closely, but he was slightly ahead. During this same period, testing of hair found on the metal part of Kalee's body was completed. The blood from this small piece belonged to Kalee Bruce, while the hair was male. Samples were taken from Kevin's apartment, allowing for a comparison of the criminal's DNA profile, which matched completely. They feared that he, like a cornered animal, could start killing again, but they managed to intercept and arrest him. Earlier, during his transfer to Chicago, he had refused to cooperate with the investigation and immediately demanded a lawyer. However, the evidence against him was irrefutable, and the prosecutor considered the trial a mere formality. Detectives discovered that Kevin had moved into the Beach Condominiums just 6 months before the murder. They suspected that he had not chosen his victim randomly. They believed he probably liked Kalee and became obsessed with her, eventually stalking her. When he found out that Kalee would be working and studying in the city, he decided to get as close to her as possible. Naturally, all this could not end well. On June 21, 1999, Kevin Holtzer's trial began. He was charged with the murder of Kalee Bruce. Despite his father's wealth and a smart defense attorney, it seemed even the attorney considered his client guilty and did not even attempt to acquit him. In October 1999, the jury decided that Kevin Holtzer was guilty of first-degree murder, and he received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. In the years since before Kevin was convicted of abuse, there may have been more attacks. Their suspicion was investigated, but it was not possible to confirm these assumptions. Everyone in his circle was in danger. In which, the witness finds her apartment door open when she comes home from work. She is shocked by the lucky coincidence that she was missed by Kevin Holtzer. The police believed this was not an accident. He had stolen the master key and used someone else's apartment because he knew that no one would be there for quite a long time. After the massacre, he entered someone else's territory to take a shower and wash away the traces of the attack. Kevin actually had no feelings for Kalee except cruelty. Any girl could have been in her place. He intentionally found excuses to approach her, chat with her, and ask for her keys because he wanted to learn how to get them. He carefully calculated Kalee's schedule as soon as she first talked to him. The lives of Traverse City residents were divided into before and after the murder of Kalee Bruce. This massacre was so cruel and senseless that the crime is still imprinted in the memory of many townspeople.